Okay, so today is Thursday, August 24th, 2023. I'm Anna Segal, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Barry Rothschild. So thank you, Barry. So Barry, I understand that you are a native Dallasite.
Yes, I grew up in Dallas. I was born in 1954, and I was so fortunate to be born in that year because I was towards the end of the baby boomers.
Right. And your parents, were they native Dallasites?
Yes, my mom grew up in Dallas. She went to Highland Park High School and also Forest High School. It seems that they moved. And she had 3 other siblings. And my dad grew up in Ennis, and he had 3 other siblings. And both sets of grandparents, well, my mom's set came from Latvia and Russia, and my dad's parents came from Ukraine or Kiev and Poland.
Wow. So do you know what year? Let's start with one side of your family and then go to the other. So let's start with your mom's side of the family. So do you know approximately when your grandparents came?
Yes, I believe that my mom's parents came around 1911, and they came through Ellis Island, and they lived in Chicago for a while. And then after in Chicago for a while, they ended up moving to Dallas.
And do you know what brought them here?
You know, I don't know what that brought them there, but my grandfather was a watchmaker, and he had a store across from SMU campus called Mustang Jewelry.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So do you remember going there?
Yes, it was a real small store. It was is on Hillcrest, and just down the street from Caldwell and Son, and across from SMU. Tiny little store, and he was 6 feet tall. He was really tall, and his daughters were, of course, my mom, which is Ethel Kessler, and there was Sadie Kessler, who became Sadie Waldman, and Mimi Kessler, who became Mimi Schlesinger, and of course Bessie, who became Bessie Kessler, who became Bessie Stahl, and they lived in Denver.
Okay. Okay. So you remember your grandparents, and do you remember where they lived?
Yeah, I remember my grandfather very well, and I remember my grandmother very well. My mom's mother died when she was 11, and so my grandfather remarried a few years later. Mm-hmm. And they lived on Prescott, near Highland Park, and also before that, probably near South Street or near Forest Avenue.
So were they involved in the Jewish community that you can remember? Did they go to synagogue or?
Yes, in fact, I have a picture of my mother's synagogue, and it was pretty neat because here it is right here. She was the Sheriff of Israel. She got confirmed there.
Perfect, perfect. Oh, that's great. That's great. And she's somewhere in there in that picture.
Yes, she's somewhere in there.
Oh, that's fabulous. And so, and then on your dad's side of the family, do you know when they came?
Yeah, they came in 1912, and they came with the anticipation of leaving, not staying, from what I understand, and going back to Russia, and they're supposed to take the Titanic. And it sounds far-fetched, but it's not that far, because it's just a way to go there and back. But they weren't planning on staying, but they ended up staying, and they went through Galveston, and they set up a store called Rothschild's. It's a dry goods store on the square in Ennis, and they were there for a long time. And my dad had 3 siblings, and one I don't remember very well, and then one of the siblings was her name. I'm trying to think of her name. Her name was, it doesn't matter, but they owned Your Florist there, which is in Preston Center, around the corner from Sanger Harris. And then, of course, my dad's older brothers, Bernard Rothschild, and they had a store here, and their store became merchandise sales.
Okay, okay. So your dad grew up in Ennis.
Yes.
And so how did he meet your mom?
He met my mom after the war. I think it was a blind date, so it was probably around 1948 or so. And they dated. Back then, people just dated not for a long time. They dated, got married. And they got married in 49, and they got married at Sheriff Israel. And I don't know if they were, I'm assuming they're at the original Sheriff Israel back then. And then after that, they moved to Dallas, and they were in Dallas around University Park.
So did your dad ever talk about what it was like growing up in Ennis?
Absolutely not. My dad didn't talk about anything about Ennis
Okay.
or growing up at all. And so then later on, my wife Debbie suggested looking and Googling and checking out things, and we found all these newspaper clippings of he was all over Texas playing semi-pro baseball. It was so funny. It was called Rothschild Rinky-Dinks, and it was pretty popular back then. And I don't know if he was the only Jewish kid there, but I looked at some of the names. Most of them are Jewish, but not all of them, and they just played all around the state. It seems that he must have, must have expanded stores. So I think they ended up having a store in Paris, Texas, and also in College Station, as well as Ennis. And then eventually, I think his father passed away, and then they ended up moving to Dallas, and that's where they opened up merchandise sales at Main and Exposition, which is near Fair Park, right down the street from where all the millineries were, and they used to dry goods. And we had toys around Christmas time and linens around springtime and Barbie dolls at times, and whatever we had, we just had a lot of stuff. And now, of course, there's a huge store when I was growing up, and now I go drive by it now, and I don't even know if it's 3,000 square feet.
Right, it seemed really big to you then. Oh, that was fun. So do you remember spending time with your grandparents?
Yeah, I remember spending a little bit of time with my mother's parents there, because we see them at Sheriff Israel, and we would usually spend Passover over at my Aunt Sadie and Uncle Willie's, Bill Waldman's house. And it was great. We used to go there, and we got to know each other pretty well there. And back then, most of the grandparents were alive back then. No grandparents. And it was, it was one of those houses on Tulip, and I don't know, 2,400 square feet, and it was every door was open, and there were tables through every single door, and it's not like today with these ginormous homes, but back then it was pretty remarkable that all the furniture was moved out, and we just put in tables to accommodate all the people for Passover.
What a great memory. What fun. So then did you grow up with lots of cousins?
Yeah, back then I had around 8 cousins or 16 cousins. It was a lot of cousins back then. And aunts, and I know that's what it was, 8 aunts and uncles. And saw the cousins occasionally, usually around high holidays or, and as it turns out that nuclear families condense, and then you don't see them as often as you did when we were kids.
So you were born in 1954?
Yes.
Right. So where did your family live when you were really young?
My dad at that time was a builder. He built homes around University Park, and specifically around Armstrong Parkway and Shenandoah and Stanhope. So we lived my family lived on on Stanhope until I was born. Then we moved across Caddy Corner to another house on Stanhope and Armstrong. And 3 or 4 of his homes are still there. I can show it to you. They're the corner houses on Stanhope, and 3 of the corner houses on Shenandoah. One was Frida Angrist, and that was a friend of mine's aunt. She used to live in one of them.
Oh, that's cool. So how long did you live there? For how much of your childhood?
My whole childhood, my entire childhood until I went to Park Cities. I went to Park Cities kindergarten.
Oh, Oh, there you are.
And there I am someplace in here, but I was, I can't really exactly figure out where I was, but I was
You graduated.
I was a great kid. I'm the one with the white hat.
Oh, okay, and you graduated.
And I graduated. I was so proud of myself.
Yeah, that's great. So that's interesting. Do you remember, were there other Jewish families or other Jewish kids in your growing up that lived in your neighborhood?
No, there were just a couple, and it was odd, because back then we had Christmas trees in the schools, whether it be at Bradfield or at middle school or Highland Park High School, and there were Christmas trees. But my dad, remember, he switched from being a builder to a store owner, and he ended up he sold Christmas decorations. So I was able to bring the coolest Christmas, ball or whatever it's called, to the classes to help hang in the classrooms. I remember when I was, I don't know, it must have been a young age, around 5 or 6, and I remember my parents said, pile in the car. No, of course, the concept of a seatbelt didn't exist. And when we turned corners, some people ended up on this side and some people ended up on that side, or I'd be tumbling back in the back of the station wagon. And we went to grade school, stood in this line, had no idea what we're doing. My parents said, just like, don't worry about it. And we stood in line like everyone else, and we got our polio vaccine.
Oh.
And that was really cool, because when I was a kid, I used to read Superman magazines, and my biggest fear was Superman had a really good friend, and he was in an iron lung because of polio. And my Aunt Shirley had polio. And my biggest fear was getting polio when I was a kid and being stuck in an iron lung. And so that was a huge thing when that happened.
That's an amazing memory. So how old were you then, do you think?
I had to be around 5 or 6, because all I do is I just go back, and 54 was when Saban and then discovered polio, what caused polio, and then the vaccine came just about 4 or 5 years later.
And do you remember, was it a shot or on a sugar cube?
Sugar cube.
You remember that?
People in white coats stood there, and the lady, of course, she was a nurse with the white hat, and I don't know if she wore a cape or anything, but she just said, take this. That was it.
Isn't that amazing? And you knew about polio already, so it really had to have a huge impact on you.
Right. It was scary, and I remember how scary getting mumps were, and getting chickenpox, and getting all those different things, and the fear of getting sick. So that was a big deal.
Oh, I love that memory. Do you remember, did anyone ever say anything to you about being Jewish? Did you ever have any problems with that?
My recollection is that they all knew we were Jewish. I don't know what they were. None of us knew that. I knew a few of the people who happened to be Catholic, and I had a good friend, he was Lutheran. But basically there are a lot of churches in, University in Highland Park, right? So we were really involved. We weren't super involved in the community, but we lived there. And I remember my 2 sisters, Sherry and Barbara, they went to a birthday party. Like everyone else went to a birthday party. Went to Dallas Country Club. How cool is that? And the man came up to Dallas Country Club and said, you need to call your mother, because we're sorry, but you cannot stay here. And so they were asked to leave.
Wow. So do you have any idea how those people knew that your sisters were Jewish?
They knew. Everyone knew. The way I look back about it, they all knew who we were. We didn't know what they were, but it was that's just how it was. And we knew that when we went to Sheretz Israel, we knew we were the peculiar kids that had to get picked up and dart away to to Hebrew school on either Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, or Monday and Wednesday afternoons, and of course on Sundays, and seemingly forever. But that's how it was, and they did other kind of stuff.
So aside from that experience that your sisters had, you don't think that your family experienced any other anti-Semitic?
No, in fact, my mom decorated for Hanukkah, and she won like a Hanukkah award for decorating blue and white. But it was inside. There was nothing outside. But we had real big in front of huge pane glass windows in the front of the house, and she decorated, and she won. I don't know if it was a sisterhood. Let's say a sisterhood award. And but no one ever bugged us. We were never egged. I was never called anything. Later on, people would say, I was rarely called Jew boy, and I was rarely made fun of because I was Jewish. People were just very accepting of me, and I look back and I know it was not like that in other neighborhoods.
So before we move away from your parents, I know you brought some pictures of your dad.
Oh, yeah. I brought some pictures of my dad. And my mother, because it's remarkable, because both of my parents were in the service during World War II. My dad, he's right there.
Okay, bring it a little. We won't be able to see his face, but it just gets the idea that
he gets the idea.
He was in. So tell us what branch of the service he was in.
He was in E6. He was a sergeant, and he was in the 8th Air Corps, which is, of course, he spoke nothing about what he did, but he was in all 5 major campaigns during World War II, and he enlisted immediately and went to Shepherd Air Force Base over in Wichita Falls and enlisted, and then he was shipped out in May, went to England, and not from England, but he ended up in North Africa, and from North Africa Sicily, and from Sicily England, and from England Germany, Battle of Bulge, Germany itself, and he was in all those campaigns. And then my mother, this is pretty cool, my mom was, she's right here, she was pretty short.
Okay.
But she was in the Navy. She joined the Navy right after high school. Isn't that incredible?
That is incredible.
Nice Jewish girls don't join the Navy.
Yeah.
She said, I'm joining the Navy. I think she probably just wanted to get away from her sisters. And it's a picture of her with her friend. That's my
like
mom.
the way you, yeah. Oh, look, she looks so young and so beautiful.
Yes.
So did she talk about that at all?
No.
No. So you don't know if they had, any experiences, because our interest is how were they treated as Jews, but you don't know anything about that.
No, but I just have to assume in the 8th Air Corps, people know that my dad was Jewish, but he was a tough guy. I mean, he was a sergeant, and he was a burly guy and athletic guy. So I think if people messed with him, he'd probably mess back. But he was a bombardier, and tough job back then. And my mom was up in Great Lakes, where the naval station is up there.
Wow, you must be really proud of what they did, that they served our country that way. That's great.
Yeah, it's incredible because I'm kind of a follower of history, and for me to have 2 parents that were there at that time, I'd love for them to call me. You always have these people say, what would you do? Wouldn't you love to go back in time and visit with someone famous like Einstein or JFK, and of course me, I'd prefer just going back and talking to my dad and my mom, as an adult.
Right. Oh, that's great. So, have your parents been gone for a long time? Have they passed away a long time ago?
Yeah, my dad passed away in 1979, and he passed away in 79. His brother passed away in 78, so they're both 66. And most of the people in my family died pretty young back then. But on my mom's side, she made it to 73, and she outlived 2 of her sisters. And let's see what else. So they've been gone. And I had a sister, an elder sister. She passed away a couple years ago during COVID. And I had a brother, Mike, and he passed away a while back. He was only 53.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So tell me about you. So you grew up in Highland Park. You went to Highland Park schools.
Yes.
Right through high school?
Graduated from Highland Park High School. And there were one other Jew in my class, and his name was Byron Sandfield. And so people like, you have 10-year anniversary or 10-year reunion, 20-year reunion, 50-year reunion. I said, well, so tell me, have you seen Byron lately? And Byron and I, we happened to run into each other one time at Temple Emmanuel. His dad was like one of the architects at Temple Emmanuel, amazingly. But I didn't know that at the time. And I said, no, why? And I forgot why. Oh, yeah, he's the other Jewish guy.
Because you were Jewish and they thought you would be really good friends, right?
Yeah, and it was hard to be friends with him because he was much taller than me.
Oh, okay. So after high school, what did you?
I was filling out college entrance things, and my dad he didn't knock on the door. He opened the door and said, "You're going to Texas Tech." I ran into some buddies at the coffee shop, and that's a great school, so apply to Texas Tech. And that's how we did all of our, today you have, companies, college connections and all that stuff. This is like 19 schools, and this could probably be the best one for you. No, Texas Tech. And then a buddy of mine dropped me off. They were on their way somewhere like to West Texas, and he ended up, his family dropped me off at college, and that's where I ended up going to Texas Tech.
Wow. Yeah, very different than today's experience.
Oh, now you decorate everyone's house.
So were there other Jewish kids? Was there a Hillel at Texas Tech at the time?
Don't think there was a Hillel. Actually, there wasn't one. There was one other Jewish girl I met, and she seemed to be nice. She was a nice girl. I think she was from, I don't know. We didn't know each other that well. And but my second year in college, some fellows asked me if I'd like to join a fraternity. So I ended up joining Kappa Alpha Order. Pretty Southern, I would say a Southern fraternity. Their spiritual leader was Robert E. Lee, so that gives you a hint. And I remember how everyone accepted me. It turns out later on I found out one fellow really didn't want me to be in the fraternity because I was Jewish, and they overruled him. I guess the blackball thing didn't work, but and then I joined there, and then I was immediately given an opportunity to be treasurer. So I was treasurer, which only makes sense. It's actually humorous now, but I was treasurer for 2 years, and it was a great experience. And no one ever, I'm saying never, said anything. And they were being Jewish. Everyone knew I was Jewish. I fasted for Yom Kippur and the holidays. I was very well aware of them, and I remember keeping Passover. And I remember how I kept everything, and they all knew that I followed the tradition.
That's good. It's good to hear that. And then did you graduate? You finished?
Graduated in 1976, and I came home and looked for a job, and I found a job working at the Apparel Mart. So back then we had the Dallas Apparel Mart on Stemmons, and I started selling boys wear. So it was like a division of Aero shirts. There used to be an Aero shirt company that was real popular back then, but I had the boys wear division, and I worked for Frank Brown, and I was one of the 10 or 11 salesmen there. And of course I was a junior salesman for a year, and then I became full-fledged salesman. And then my wife and I back then, we had to move to Mississippi for a few years. And after Mississippi for a few years, a fellow named Harvey Epstein in Dallas, and he was in the uniform business, which I didn't know what the uniform business was, but it turns out it had to be uniforms for nurses. And he said, why don't you come back to Dallas and come work for me? And I worked for him for like a year, and then he retired, and I ended up taking a few lines of uniforms. One was Action Line out of Dallas, and in fact they used a bunch of different stuff. Uniforms, and we had capes and white, everything was white. So you had like 80 garments on a rack of white garments, and I traveled the Southwest.
Okay, and then that became your business? I understand you were in the uniform business.
Yeah, and then in 87, I decided to try my luck at doing my own thing and started a business back then in '87 and had 3 other partners, and they really weren't involved in business, and it was called, back then it was called Peaches Uniforms, and traveled the country and established territories, and eventually people would call me up and say, would you like to have a rep up here? So eventually I developed a sales force, and then after like 5 years, I bought out my 3 partners, and then continued to grow the business, and grew it substantially until we had a very nice business, and sold it recently to a company called Cherokee, and they are out of California. They're the largest. They own 60% of the marketplace, and we had 5%, and so it was terrific. So they bought it and sold it 2 years ago, and finished out my career in that company in December.
Great, and you're retired now.
Yes, I'm retired now.
So, sounds like you were busy traveling and probably may not have had a lot of time for this. Did you have any involvement in the Jewish community in those years, or were you out of town too much?
I was out of town a lot, but I was always an usher at Temple Emmanuel, and later on I had some, when I started not travel as much, I worked Brotherhood. I was involved, vice president of Brotherhood. I was really involved in Temple Emmanuel, JCC, Federation, American Jewish Committee, and also APAC. Really involved in APAC back then. But mainly my 2 biggest things I was involved with was Federation and the JCC.
Okay, all good things, all good things. So I'm going to jump ahead because I definitely don't want to ignore this part. You and your wife, Debbie,
Yes.
Have done some really nice things in the community, and one of them was the Shabbat show.
Yes.
And if you could, I know you brought a picture about that. If you could show that and then tell us about that.
There's a Shabbat
There you
show.
go. Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
Okay.
great. So, my wife Debbie and I, we've been married, will be 10 years this next January. And we merged our families, and I had 2 girls, Liz, who's married to Daniel Bracken, and daughter Caroline, and Daniel and Liz are teachers at Lake Hill Prep here in Dallas, and Caroline, who's finishing up her Master's of Architecture over in University of Miami. And I merged with Debbie and her 3 boys. The oldest is Jeremy, married to Lauren, and Jeremy's with Mass Mutual. Lauren's president of the Builders Association in San Antonio. The middle son is Greg, and their last name is Mandel. And he works for Facebook for years, and his wife Corey, and she works for a nonprofit helping people with getting mortgages, getting homes, getting places to live, and also during the tax season helping with their taxes. And then the youngest is Eli, and Eli's married to Amberly. Eli works for Baylor Scott & White, and Amberly she's a nurse, but she's in the process of learning, taking a course in her master's of RN, and so studies out of Georgetown. And between all of these kids, Debbie and I got married, and since we've been married back in 2015, there are 6 grandchildren.
Lovely.
So it's really kind of cool.
That is really cool. That is really cool. And so you and Debbie, during COVID, did this Shabbat show. And
Yes.
you want to tell us how that started and what it was?
Yes. I was very involved in the beginning of the Shabbat show, and this is how. COVID was announced on March 13th, and so the following week, of course, Debbie is a yoga instructor, and she moved from being a yoga instructor to just a yoga instructor through a spiritual lens, through a Jewish lens, and also teaches. She teaches mindfulness and meditation throughout the community, in the churches. What's wrong with me? Like Sheriff Israel and JFS and Temple Emmanuel, and used to be, of course, at Beth Torah, and back then it was with some companies like At Home and stuff like that. And COVID hit, everything closed. And she said, this would be a great idea. Why don't we use our new Facebook portals we just got, and why don't we just kind of do something at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon and kind of help people bring in the Shabbat. And she was making, she was already making challahs every Friday, and so we set up the thing, and the Facebook thing, and she started talking about stuff. And can't remember if she started talking about different kinds of crystals, because she's an expert and she has accreditation in crystals. And so she has all these rocks and stuff like that, maybe a book or two, and then it led into, at the very end of the 20 or 25 minutes, I would give a 2 or 3 minute summary of a Torah portion. And then she'd bake her challah. My job was at the end to say, hey, what about the challah? Bring it out. So she'd bring it out, and sometimes I would forget that stuff, but it was pretty funny. And we had guests. So we had rabbis, we had cantors, we had all the leaders of the community, whether it be Artie over at JCC, or at the time who the president of Federation was, or the chair of Federation, and we'd have, Brad Sham came by, and I can't remember all the people that came by. One of our oldest sons, Jeremy, came by and talked about bourbon one time, and sometimes we went outside and we had maybe the Narenbergs over, and we talked about playing pickleball, and boy, it was really fun. So we did this for 2 full years. Never missed a Friday. Wherever we were, we just pull up Facebook, and we could do it from anywhere we ever were. And it was a great run. We had 100 to 200 people every day. Sometimes we ran up to like 3,000 at one time. It was kind of a cool thing. People around the country were watching us. It was actually really fun.
Yeah, well, I got to watch it a few times, and it was great. It really brought people together at a very strange time.
It brought people together because you couldn't go to temple, and you couldn't go to the synagogue, and it gave people a chance to kind of see some Judaism at 4 o'clock and get prepared to maybe go Zoom services, because that was who would have thought that's how we had watch services. And it was terrific, and people really looked forward to it, and they set their Zoom portals to our.
And I have one last, it's not really a question, but I have noticed your name in the letters to the editor recently.
Yes, terrific. They're so nice to me, and they publish a lot of the letters. They seem like sports ones, but I have like 4 or 5 sitting out there right now in the queue to see if they will publish them. But if I find something interesting, I write a quick letter. Of course, while I'm doing this, Debbie's over in the other room writing articles and publishing in the Texas Jewish Post every week. So hers are more involved, but it's kind of cool to be published in the Dallas Morning News so often.
That is for sure. I don't have any more questions. I don't know if there's anything that we haven't covered that you want to mention, or if you feel like we've covered the main things.
Let's see. Well, I can't go without mentioning the grandkids.
Okay.
So the first one is Miles. He's just turned 9, and he goes to Lake Hill. And the second one is Layla, and she's 7, and she goes to Lake Hill also. And then down in San Antonio, there's Maggie, and Maggie's 7, and she goes to just started first grade, which is very cool. And then after Avery, who's in Austin, and she's 7, and she just started 1st grade. And then there is, let's see, Ezra. And Ezra is now in San Antonio. They used to live in Dallas, but they just recently moved. And she's just starting pre-K. And because she's turned 4. And then there's Eliana back in Austin, and she just turned 3, and she's beautiful, and she's down there in Austin, and she's in whatever she's in.
Whatever, preschool, Mother's Day out. But
it's great.
I was just thinking what a lovely way to end with the grandchildren, because I'm thinking about your grandparents on both sides, how they made their way to this country and to Texas, and now your family is just spread through Texas, and that's wonderful.
It's spread through Texas, and it's wonderful.
So thank you, Barry.
Thank you so much.